Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. This is Crossroads, and Crossroads is a project of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. We're really glad that you are here with us in the room and online. Thank you. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and I will tell you, I am tired today. As most of you know, part of my work is lobbying at the State House, and it has been a hell of a ride the last couple of weeks. So I am grateful to each of you because I know many of you have come to the State House and talked with legislators. You have sent emails, made phone calls, gone to forums. It has been a hard couple of weeks, and I am grateful that you are willing always to use your voices on behalf of Iowans and to try to make our state better. So thank you for all of your work. If you get our email, we sent out our legislative update this morning. You'll see in there the things that are still live. Yesterday was they always say Friday, but it's really Thursday. They don't work on Fridays. And so you'll see in there what's still alive, and you'll see what we like to say is the legislative graveyard. So things that have died with the first funnel. But I also like to remind folks that while bills may die, bad ideas never do. And so they can be attached to other bills. They can be brought to life in a myriad of ways. So please pay attention, and we will continue to send out information on a timely basis, and we try to be very accurate. The one really good thing is that if you were paying attention, the chaplains in public schools, those bills died. So both bills in the Senate and the House. So thank you for using your voice and saying that that was just a really, really bad idea, and that chaplains are not the same as school social workers and school counselors. My sister-in-law is a school counselor in Cedar Rapids, and so it was very personal to our family as well. Half my family are educators, so we're very glad that that bill died. Doesn't mean that it will not come back, so because bad ideas come back. So we will continue to keep you in the loop on that. Monday, we have our lobby day. If you haven't signed up for it, you are still welcome to come. It begins at 11 o'clock at the State House. If you want to come, let Kristen or Bridget know. And we sent out an email yesterday to those folks who have registered, so we'll resend that email to you if you want to be there. It's 11 to 3, but really whatever portion of time you can give. And we'll do the first hour is a little bit of training. We're going to meet briefly with Leader Conference. And then we'll go up and lobby legislators. Should be hopefully a good day to lobby, but we'll see how that works out. So you never know up there. And then Monday night is our Doing Justice fundraiser for our Action Fund. So if you've signed up for that, thank you so much, and we hope you can be with us. If you haven't, you can still sign up, and we would love to have you there. It is our only event that we hold to raise money for our lobbying piece of the work, and so we would love to have you be with us. That is Monday, 5:30 to 7:30 at the Windsor Heights Community Center. So there's some flyers on the table if you want more information. So thank you so much. Today, it's a little bit different subject than we normally tackle as an organization. We often are talking about various social justice issues, and had a conversation this fall with our speaker, and I thought this would be of interest to you all in a myriad of ways in your lives, whether you're part of a house of worship or just in your civic life. We just had some incidents in Kansas City, not really terrorism related, but there's just more and more occasions to have good, solid information of extremism and terrorism and violence in our communities. And so I want to introduce you to, he's a long name, but he assures me I should just say Dio. Dio Ayala is the Emergency Management and Homeland Security Director for Madison County, where he leads in planning, protection, mitigation, response, and coordination against various community threats. His focus is on fostering a culture of preparedness in the country, a veteran of the United States Navy. Dio holds a bachelor's and master's degree in criminal justice from Simpson College and is a member of Phi Beta Sigma. He has completed programs like the Texas A&M Infrastructure Protection Program, Executive Leadership Education from Notre Dame, and Hazardous Materials WMD, I assume that's Weapons of Mass Destruction, Operations and Technician Training from the Department of Homeland Security. Additionally, he's a graduate of the Bomb Making Materials Awareness Program. I think we want to hear that. And Enhanced Trainer Program by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Dio is currently advancing his education in security studies, homeland security, and defense at the Naval Postgraduate School, expecting to graduate this fall. So will you help me welcome Dio Ayala?
You guys hear me? Yeah. All right. Robot here. Okay. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. So I'm just going to get right into it because I have a lot of oh man, that goes bad. It's getting worse. I'll tell you what. Can you hear my voice? Can I just turn this up? Okay. There we go. Is that better? Yeah. All right. Perfect. Okay. So I kind of want to get right into it. FBI Director Christopher Wray has said, and I got some quotes up there, that one of our biggest threats to our democracy is domestic terrorism. He's talked before the House, Senate. He's talked to many, many people about why it's so important to really start looking at the domestic terror threat and find ways to mitigate and ultimately, hopefully, snuff it out. So what we're talking about today is an awareness of what's going on, kind of where we're at, and kind of what we can do to do a better job at recognizing domestic terror, and then obviously looking ways to stop it. So this is me. My bio was large, just like big happy smiley face. So I'm just going to keep pushing down the road. I guess the biggest highlight here is that I'm working on a thesis that's basically looking at using policies and laws in order to fight domestic terrorism. So that's the highlight of this whole slide today. So our current state. We all know what our last terrorist attack was, right? That was September 11th, 2001. Our last international terrorist attack where we were attacked from a foreign adversary to our homeland. Now, there have been many preventions and tactics that were used to stop that happening again, but overall, a lot of our focus is based upon what happened on 9/11, right? Homeland Security was created, the Homeland Security Department was created because of that. And the idea is to look at, what can we do to protect our homeland? But one thing that we have not done a really good job at, or trying to get better at, is the domestic side. We would agree, right, that right now we're in a very interesting time in our lives where it doesn't matter what your ideology is, everyone seems to be very angry, right? And with that anger causes a lot of bad decision making. So that's really, really important is it doesn't matter what you are, what you believe in, everyone believes that because the country is going in a different direction, that political violence will get it back on track. So imagine you have people right now that are preparing to start a war to get their country back. Okay, so this is a big, big issue. January 6th is just kind of a tip of the iceberg when it comes to things of this nature. And because of this, it's good business, right? So I don't know if you guys realize, but there's books about this next civil war that's supposed to happen, right? So the anticipation of what America will look like after that civil war. In fact, in the middle is a movie called The Civil War that's going to talk about this, and it's coming out this year, which is not, if you don't think about that, with all that's going on, it's great marketing, but very scary, okay? Now I would say if you get a chance, these are really two good books I've read both books, they're very, very good, but the idea again is to think about what would that look like if we did have this kind of a conflict and how we could prevent that. According to the movie, this is what America would look like. Right, it'd be split up into little different tiers, and as you can see, Texas is its own republic, California, there's different things. And we kind of chuckle at this, but there are people out there that really believe this is the best way to maintain. So how do we get here? I don't know if you knew this or not, but our friends overseas, Russia, China, and I say that sarcastically, are really happy that we're having these problems. In fact, down at the Texas border, the whole conflict with immigration, Russia and China have really pushed the idea like, hey, there's a civil war coming. Texas is going to start this war. Let's push this propaganda out. Unfortunately, people are looking on the internet for their news information, so they're seeing stuff like that, right? Like, oh, maybe Texas really is starting a war. I really should prepare because this is going to happen very, very soon. If you look at, the influence of the government, Chinese government on just social media alone, it's very, very important. But also, people are starting to distrust the media, right? So they just like, oh, I can't believe the media, but I'll go on TikTok and get my news today, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of different things that are out there that are causing, this kind of angst. Also, because of this, right, people that are looking to cause terror and do bad things, they love this kind of information, right? So COVID was a really big deal when COVID restrictions came out. People got really upset about that. That kind of caused a lot of problems. But also the internet, social media, 8chan, 4chan, these different websites that are out there, they kind of have people that are promoting this, right? So it's a constant feeding of, we're going to go to war. We have to do something to protect our country. I know my memes are not working. We're going to push on. But you know what? What I had there were memes, right? So memes that said like, if red and blue got together, the red has more guns, right? And take the red pill, and if you are Democrat, you have the best ideas. If you're Republican, you have the worst ideas. So there's this constant angst. Now, one of the biggest things that we think about this terrorism and these ideologies is the differences, right? So everyone here, I imagine, has different thoughts in their minds on what America should look like or how you should feel, right? But we can have a conversation. We're supposed to have a conversation saying, hey, I don't agree with you, but let's talk this out. And now we're getting to the point now where there is no civil discourse. It's just looking to cause violence in order to get our information out there. So I try to make this really nice and friendly in the picture. This is the definition of domestic terrorism, right? So it's a criminal act on the U.S. soil that basically is looking to influence and to change things, right? And this is the one definition of domestic terrorism that I found very interesting. The second definition is a little more legalese, right? So mass destruction, assassinations, kidnappings, things that will alter human life and or will try to manipulate the government to make change. That is what domestic terrorism is. So you think about, all right, this is what domestic terrorism looks like. So we have it defined. So kind of, have you had these problems before? And I guess my math's not working again. But just to give you a quick thing here, everything's not working apparently. 357% increase in domestic terror cases. 357. So that's not something that we could balk at. That's a lot of cases that we're seeing here. So now what seems not to be working for me right now is there's a picture of different people of domestic terrorists, right? Because the thing about domestic terrorists, they come in all sizes and shapes. If you remember Dylan Ruth, who went down in South Carolina a couple of years ago and went to a church and killed a bunch of people because he didn't believe that they had their right to be alive and just basically enjoy their life, right? You had a guy in Buffalo who went out there to the Tops grocery store last year and killed a bunch of people because he felt like he was being replaced. So these are the things that are happening out there. But you also have people that attack police. You have people that attack just everyday people just because. So now, domestic terrorism is not new in the USA, right? I think everyone would agree with that. So I'm gonna give you a couple of cases. And again, I don't know why my pictures are not working, but I will just explain it to you so we have more of a face-to-face. You have to be, when you're in this kind of job, you have to prepare for things like this, right? So I got this. I studied this for quite a while. All right, so these pictures would show you the Tulsa Massacre, right? I don't know if you guys remember the Tulsa Massacre, Black Wall Street, all those things, okay? So domestic terrorism is not new to the U.S. This is a really staggering number, and that's just the amount of people that were lynched. That's not firebombed, that's not shot, but that's a lot of people. So that's our first really big look at domestic terrorism in the United States. Picture's not working, but I will tell you the story. Puerto Rico, right? It's a hotbed issue. It's a Commonwealth. A lot of people in Puerto Rico want to become a state, but some people in Puerto Rico don't want it to be a state. Want to leave it the way it was. There was the first attack on the Capitol, because people think January 6th was the biggest one. This actually was a pretty big one, where 4 protesters came into the Capitol and shot into the House of Representatives. One person was wounded, everyone else was actually okay. But again, it was an ideology, right? We want freedom, so therefore we're going to cause violence in order to get that. This is Oklahoma City, which is a picture of the suspects. But Oklahoma City is another example. Timothy McVeigh really didn't like what happened at Ruby Ridge, didn't like it happened at Waco, so he decided on the anniversary of Waco, he was going to destroy a building with federal employees. And he killed babies. He parked it right in front of a daycare center, so he killed children. He killed a bunch of people in order to push his ideology. So, and then something that people don't think about is the Animal Liberation Front and the Earth Liberation Front. Right, so people that go out and you have animals that are being tested on, or so on and so forth, they don't agree with that. And the amount of damage that they've done, just blowing up facilities and terrorizing people, that's another one, right? Because they want animals and the earth to be left alone. Therefore, they use their ideology to try to get you to change your minds. So you may not know this, or you may know this, but I would say if you want to write something down, this is something you should look at. It's a national strategy for countering domestic terrorism, and it was created by President Biden after what happened on January 6th. Now, just think about that for a second. I just showed you 4 cases of domestic terrorism, and we just now have figured out that we need to find a way to fight domestic terrorism. Okay. So it's all available online. I would highly recommend you take a look at that because there's a lot of good information on there on how to look at domestic terrorism. And nothing's working. Today's threats, okay, are, if you look at today's threats, it's the extremist groups, right? So people that want to stop minorities, women, girls, LGBTQ from just living their lives, right? So I don't like what's going on, therefore I'm going to cause harm and infliction upon them. That's one group. Second group is anti-government, anti-authority bond extremists. Right, so their job basically is just to cause terror to the government because in their eyes, I can destroy the government and start all over again. Right, if I topple the seat of Congress, I topple the Senate, then I can start my government brand new. And if you look at the map that I showed you earlier of the U.S., that's what people want. Right, this is what these people want. So 2 kind of profiles on this is domestic bond extremists. So again, their job is to carry out attacks any means that they can. Then you have the militia bond extremists, which if you think about it, we have a lot of people because of our rights here in America that can go and train in the jungles, right? Go train and do things. Not train, go train in the forest in order to prepare for this domestic war that's coming. Okay. There's a manual, and I actually blacked it out because I don't want to give away what the name of the manual is. All right, I'm cognizant of that. So I blacked it. It would look really cool if it didn't have the rest of it. But this actually works out better for me because now you really don't know what I'm talking about. You just have to hear me out. But there's a manual that's out there that has been pushed around on the internet, and I'm not going to give you the name, so I wouldn't tell you to go find it. But the manual is based upon looking at ways to destroy infrastructure, okay? So this is infrastructure, right? So bridges, tunnels, power lines, telephone lines, water, all those things are out there. So but you guys being here kind of learn what this is really important because this helps counter what they're trying to do, okay? So, I got this one right. So this kind of breaks down what it is. So it talks about explosives, how to make those explosives. It talks about how to, put those explosives where they need to be. It talks about the declaration, so a declaration of why we're doing this, and it's broken up almost like, you think of like the cookbooks that you get passed down, and it's like your aunt, your grandma, your uncle. It's just like imagine if a cookbook was not a good cookbook. It's just a bunch of people's ideas in order to make that work. But the whole thing is to talk about the actions and why we're doing this, and then obviously report that back. So it's not good for anybody. The content is pretty bad. Again, what I just told you, but also 3D printing of weapons, right? So using 3D printers, so you could actually bypass the law, right? So think about Timothy McVeigh, he bypassed the law by making all the explosives himself. So the idea is not just worrying about people that are just getting dynamite anymore. It's people that are actually making these chemicals at home in order to cause harm. There's a theory that's behind this. It's called social identity theory. It's an in group and an out group. So I'm going to give you a quick lesson here on social identity theory. And the idea is the in group are the bad guys, right? So the people that we consider to be harmful that are trying to hurt our democracy. And they're anti-government. They want an ethno-state that's important to them. And in order to have that in place, they have to cause us violence. And then everyone else who does not believe in that is the out group. Okay. So even if you take away if it's a certain group, if it's the Animal Liberation Front, right? They're the in group, right? And everyone else is the out group. And the idea is do what we need to do from their side in order to influence someone else. So again, nothing's working. But I'm gonna tell you, it's a conceptual model. This is a terrorist attack cycle, okay? And the terrorist attack cycle, so just hear me out, it's like a circle, okay? And it talks about ways that people that are causing terror use the cycle in order to get to their goal. And they use Timothy McVeigh as an example, and this is provided by CISA. But the idea is initial surveillance, pre-surveillance, planning, right? So how I plan my attack, my last kind of look at funding, financing, all those things. And this conceptual model is important. And when I'm done talking, I'll zip back through here and I'll pop it up. I promise I have another way to do this. But the conceptual model is important because there are ways in which we can stop these things from happening and how to protect yourself. I've already given you all the gloom. Now I'm going to give you how to protect yourself. So here we go. One of the biggest things that the government's looking at is enhancing investigation tools in order to stop these things from happening, right? So there's different things that the government is planning upon. My thesis is based upon that, is looking at some tools that we use from the past in order to fight these things in the present. So if you wait like till October, you can see my thesis. It'll be fantastic. I want to give you the whole thing away. But again, it's based upon looking at ways that we've had tools in the past in order to fight against these groups. So you're probably thinking like, okay, in the last 15 minutes, he's told me doom and gloom. Where do I start, right? Where do I go from here? So I'm going to give you some tips on where you go from here, what we can think about. First is research. Research is so important, right? So I told you earlier that people are looking for alternate news sites, right? And they're falling into traps because people that know that you're looking for alternate news sites are therefore spreading fake propaganda to get you upset, right? So I would say if you see something like Texas is starting a civil war, or if you're talking to your buddy and he's like, did you know that 37% of Americans carry knives in their socks? And out of the 37, 4 ride horses on Tuesday? You would say that's absolutely ridiculous. Where'd you get those numbers? Right, but now if I told you that 87% of America is preparing for a civil war, you may believe that a little bit more, right? Or if in the 87%, 20% are in Texas, and they're already on the border with sniper rifles, right? My point is, it can get really, really ridiculous, and get the research, right? So when someone tells you that, say, you know what? I'm gonna look this up. Let me make sure this makes sense. Or hey, we should probably look more into this information. This is the old adage. I say this all the time. People in my jobs, see something, say something. And this is how it always goes. Something bad happens, okay? The news comes. They interview somebody, and they say, hey, did you know so-and-so? And the person they interview goes, yeah, the other day, I heard an explosion. And I just thought, it's just Jim. And then actually, before that, I remember Jim told me like he really hated this thing. But I thought, well, Jim's having a bad day, right? So it's the signs, right? So people give you signs, and it's for you to be like, hey, this seems a little strange. What's going on, right? Why are you saying these things? And if it's something that's so outlandish, then let somebody know, right? Because again, this is how we protect ourselves. And I'm not saying to have a list of all the weird quirks your neighbors have. But what I'm saying is, be a little more cognizant of what's going on. So, when's the last time you had a threat assessment in your facility? So, I'm going to make it wild guess here. Some people are here for churches, other places. When's the last time you had a threat assessment? What does that mean? When's the last time somebody come in and said, hey, these windows, you could probably lock these windows down at night, probably watch this door, right? Now, there's something that is really great. Every county, so I'm from Madison County, but every county has an emergency management agency, and that's what we do. Right? If you're in Polk County, reach out to Polk County. If you're in Warren County, reach out to Warren County. But these are the things that you can look at because I don't know if you saw what happened on Sunday down in Texas, right? A woman walked in with her kid. She had an IED and she had a gun and she was taken out. But just the effect of that happening in a church, you think people are going to go back to that church on Sunday? No, probably not, right? Because now people are a little more concerned. So the idea again is to have someone come out and do an assessment of your church. How do you recognize suspicious behavior, right? So how do you do that? Well, one of the things you could do is if someone comes in, they're acting a little strange, say hello, the power of hello. How you doing today, right? Because sometimes if it's proven if I'm a bad person and I'm going to cause harm and you say hello to me, you throw me off, right? That attacks like I was telling you about before, because that means you're paying attention to me, right? So now I'll be like, oh, they see me, I gotta go somewhere else. And that's what happened with McVeigh when with the bombing, is because he was scared at certain places because people stopped and said hello, and he's like, oh, I gotta go, right? He wants, because people that do this kind of work don't want to be recognized. They want to kind of slip in and slip out. So the idea is to recognize that there is some bad behaviors. Situational awareness. We live in a world where our cell phones are stuck to our faces, right? 24/7. Maybe not you guys, right? No, but I see some cell phones out here, so I'm making an assumption that's true. But the idea is we're so unaware of what's around us, right? So if you think about what happened at the Boston Marathon bombing, they're able to slip bags down with IEDs in order to cause explosions because people were just looking toward the race, which you're supposed to, right? You're watching a marathon, but the idea is to see what's around you and be aware, right? So how can you be more situationally aware? Number one is a baseline. I come in here, I did a baseline. I said, hey, this seems like it's supposed to work. People eating lunch, people having a good time. That's normal. That's a normal behavior. If I go to church, I'm going to enjoy fellowship, right? Now, the baseline that wouldn't work is if I came in here and people were all mad and angry, right? Or if I go into church and then I'm not here for fellowship, right? I'm here for something else. I'm being strange. I got stuff in my pockets, looking around, right? So considering a baseline of what's normal versus which is abnormal will really help kind of secure your facilities. And then seek resources. So there's a lot of people out there that are looking at this stuff. I'm one of them, right? There's a lot of people in the state looking at this stuff around the country. If you have questions, seek the resources, right? Hey, I got some additional questions. There's grants that are out there. There's a Homeland Security grant program that's out there. It's called HSGP. That you actually can look for grants that can help further secure facilities. That's something to think about as well. But again, there's a lot of resources out there that people can kind of talk through to help you out. There was something that's missing there, but I'll tell you, because again, my internet's not working all of a sudden. There's two things. So the state of Iowa has something called TIPS, right? So if you look up Iowa Homeland Security and type in TIPS, it'll show you a program that's actually designed to help you look at threat assessment, look at different things that we talked about. And then CISA, which is the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency, also has different things to securing facilities, because CISA looks at the cyber side, but also the infrastructure side. So there's like church guides, there are different things that are out there. So if you decide to start the process, I would say reach out to your emergency management agency. But if you want to look at some more things and explore some more things, then I definitely would say look at CISA as well, because CISA has a lot of good information. And then the last thing I was going to say here, and this is something that CISA has in classes that have been pretty successful. These are classes that are free to the public, right? So if you leave here and you say, man, I got a lot to do, I have a lot to think about, these classes are available, and I can get you the link to kind of, if you wanted to get those, and they're free. They cost $0.00. I've taught a couple of these classes around the metro to churches and other organizations as well. So there are a lot of things, there are a lot of resources out there to stop these threats. And again, really it comes down to recognizing where you see those threats, understanding that we're going to see more threats, right? So we are in a very interesting time in our lives here with this election cycle, and just knowing like what to do if you run across those things. So I sped through that pretty quick, although my PowerPoint was not where it needed to be. So this is question time, right? I'm going to pull up something here while we do that.
If you have questions, if you'll just raise your hand and I will bring the microphone to you, and then catch my eye and you can be the next one. And if you're online, just put your questions in the chat.
There's been some talk recently about arming teachers to protect our schools. Would you please comment on that silly idea?
Here's my general opinion. It's just regular old deal here. Everyone does things differently, right? So the idea that arming teachers to protect our students is a novel approach. So for SROs are important, school resource officers, right? They're trained in order to protect students. They're police officers usually, or former police officers, or whatever the case may be, right? But the idea is to have that. But sometimes I talk to people, and again, this is my opinion. I don't know if anyone, I'm not going to say raise a hand who here has ever shot a gun. I was in the military, I've shot plenty of guns. When your adrenaline's running, your eyes change, right? You don't focus like you used to. Also, there's the idea of crossfire. Right, so if I feel like I can see the target and I'm aiming at the target, and then someone else who's also armed is aiming at the target, and we're very, now we're kind of zoned in like this, I may not see that person. So to answer your question in a very slick and dicey way, I would say that in my opinion, my personal opinion, I think you should be trained in order to do that kind of thing, because you have to realize when your adrenaline, all those things are happening, that your vision gets smaller, and if you have little people running around in front of you and you're trying to take off that target, I mean, it's hard for police officers to do that, let alone someone that doesn't do that every single day. Yeah. So there's my answer for you, Mike. You're welcome. I figured you did.
So mine is just a comment when you said, like, be aware or say hi. And right away, I thought of the incident back a couple years ago, I'm not sure how long ago, where this Marine was going to bomb the mosque in Indiana. And he went in and they were friendly. And now he's a part of that Muslim community. So, yeah. So just, you can change things by being aware and I guess saying hello, being friendly, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, they call the power of hello, right? So not everyone's going to say hello back, but if some people will be like, oh, hi, oh, how you doing? But that the people at the mosque recognized something was off, right? So they were able to diffuse the situation by just saying, hey, what's going on? And I know what you're talking about because they actually talked. I've seen the story. They talked about the history and of Islam religion, and so yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for being here. I am in a book club currently, and we are reading a book about white supremacy, and it's basically a connection with domestic terrorism. And this was from the early 1900s, and it seems that those activities are repeating themselves 100 years later. So there's some comfort in that because they were able to, squash it to some extent at that time. But it feels like we're in a more dangerous position right now because we have the internet and all of this information, whether good or bad, out there infiltrating our homes and our families and our friends and things like that. And so I'm a little skeptical that we will be able to defeat this type of white supremacy domestic terrorism as well as we've been able to in the past. But wondering if that kind of is the majority of the domestic terrorism that we're seeing, whether that's coming from these white supremacy groups throughout the country, and if there are other groups outside of that, or if our main focus should be on these white supremacists. White supremacists.
Yeah, so I would say a little bit of both, right? So there have been an increase in white supremacist groups, right, that are domestic terrorists. We've also seen an increase on just anti-government groups that hate everything, right? So a good example is there's a group called the Boogaloo Boys that depending on what their thought is that day. So Boogaloo Boys at one time would be considered white supremacist groups, but then they also were there to defend Black Lives Matter protesters. Right, so it's a very odd, very odd place to be in. So to answer your question, yes, there has been an increase in white supremacist groups, but there are other little off splinter groups that also are looking at that also want to take advantage of what's going on when it comes to the instability of our government. So I would say yes and yes, but I would also kind of tie that off that we have seen in the past in history that it has been suppressed. It hasn't really never been defeated. If you think about the KKK has been around since the Civil War. They're still around, right? They've been offshoots or splintered or kind of taken out, but they're still there, right? And it comes back to the ideology, and that's what we need to fight is the ideologies. So the hatred's still there. The ideologies are still there, right? So yes.
I wonder what you think about Russia's nuclear weapons in space. I worry about them cutting off the internet, and cutting satellites down and messing up our infrastructure domestically.
Well, I mean, I could speak to, there's a lot of safeguards in place in order to protect our infrastructure, right? That's why it's important for everyone to understand, like there are things that are out there that can cause harm. I'm not really familiar with what Russia's space program is up to, but I would definitely say that there are countries like I showed you earlier that are really hoping for us to fail at this. China, Russia, North Korea. There's a lot of countries that are out there that want to see it. So, and there's a cyber war, right? This is nothing new. There's a cyber war that goes on every day. We're doing our thing over there. They're doing stuff to us. But in order for us to continue as a democracy, in order for us to continue to live as where we are, we have to just recognize these, poor behaviors. Yes.
I'm a member of Tifereth Israel Synagogue, and we've been on lockdown for about 3 or 4 years. We have to have fobs to get in, and we have police officers that are at the door most times, and especially if there's an event. We have had training. There's a notebook that there are suspicious people that have tried to enter our synagogue, and they have pictures of those people, so we're supposed to be aware of those people. And then also, we cannot advertise that we have the Iowa Jewish Historical Society has a museum. It's a wonderful museum, but we can't advertise where it's at or anything. And the school that they have for the children, there's no sign, and it's in a location that's not advertised as well. And so I don't know. We've had training. We have a safe room. That is adjacent in the where most of our congregants pray and everything. There's a safe room, but it's just like, how much more do we need to do to feel safe?
Well, first of all, it's terrible to hear, right? Because again, in my personal opinion, you shouldn't have to hide and in order to enjoy your faith. Okay, so that is right off the bat. I would also say that you guys are taking really good precautions because of what's happening in this world. Actually, security-wise, you are doing the best you can. And my hope, again, is why practitioners are talking about this, is that we can get to a state where we can open up again, right? We can share information. I always tell churches to look at your page and see what's out there, because open source is really easy to do. I can Google your spaces without even having to show up. That's what people do, right? So taking pictures down, being a little more secure, not telling everyone your schedules. And it's terrible to think about, right? But again, my hope is at the end of this, wherever the end is, I don't know, right? Maybe hopefully I'm alive, maybe my kids will be alive to see it, that we can kind of get back to just people just doing their own things and staying safe. But yeah, it's heartbreaking to have to hear what you have to go through and hide who you are. I think you've done a lot. You've done a lot more than most people do. So I would say, I think go with what you got and adjust how you can, right? I mean, if you have to hide where your locations are and those things, I mean, there's nothing. I couldn't tell you something that professionally that I could say that you're doing wrong. You're doing everything right, but it's horrible that you have to do that. Yeah.
We have a question from online. Would the people who are claiming our money system is collapsing, so move your investments now, be considered a terrorist tactic or an example of scamming seniors or simple chicken little fear?
I think it's more about scamming, right? Because usually those tactics say, but if you invest with me, right? Have you guys seen the programs with like MREs and meals ready to eat? Like the world's coming to an end, but if you buy 64 gallons of this food, you'll be able to keep your, right? So these are people that are using the advantage of uncertainty in the world and instability in order to profit. I would say anytime that someone's telling you to move your money, don't listen. It's your money, right? Especially if it's an investment. Like if you invest in gold and silver, just keep your money. So I would say it's more of a scam than anything else. So. Yes.
Several years ago at Drake University, I heard a presentation and it ended up with a panel, all different aspects of the national government. And the one I remember is the person from the military who said, you all need to be prepared to take care of yourself for 3 days. So that's everything. You get absolutely nothing during the 3-day period that you need to be prepared for. Tell me what you think about that.
I agree. So, for me in Madison County, I say it all the time. So think about like a natural disaster. There's no, you assume that people will get there to you right away. If it's like an earthquake or multiple bad devastation, it may take a couple hours. It may take a day, right? If you're under rubble, right? So it's good to have water, medications, pet medications, right? People don't think about their pets, pet medication, food supply, like just something that if you're trapped and you can get to that supply, that you have it in order to stay alive. We always talk about the electrical grid. The electrical grid goes tomorrow for 4 days. I mean, you have what you need, right? So you should be thinking about that. And I'm not saying now, like, go home and like, the guy told me that I have to buy 60 gallons. No, but you should have some resources available. I mean, even can opener, it sounds silly, but you can eat stuff out of a can, right? So I would say 100% on board with that. You want to be prepared just because you just don't know what's going to happen, right? Today, it snowed this morning, it's sunny today. We could have a tornado tomorrow. We could have 50 inches of rain on Monday. It's Iowa, right? So it's better to be prepared now than wondering, oh, I should have done this. Think about snow. One last, like snow. You go to when it snows, like people steal all the bread and milk, right? Have that mentality, but not steal bread and milk, right? Just have things prepared just in case. So, yes.
Do I press this? How confident should we be, do you, in your opinion, in the FBI's ability to identify these various groups, keep up with it all, forestall anything that might happen, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so actually, I'm not going to call the person out because they told me that they have a son that works as part of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, right? So Joint Terrorism Task Force has been around since, looking at the 9/11 attacks, right? There's a lot of things that the government's not going to tell you, right? Because if the government told you every time a thwart an attack, then people are going to be like, well, I haven't tried hard enough. I got to try again. I would say that the FBI, HSI, this is so many 3 little agencies in this country. They're doing their best to stop these kind of attacks. Again, because we have to think about international and domestic, right? That's a big lift. And there's a lot of interagency operations and coordination that's happening because of what happened on 9/11. People weren't talking. There's a lot of things that are happening. So I would say I'm confident because, again, there's things that are getting put out, like I talked to you guys about already. There's programs out there that they're trying to recognize. But again, a lot of that stuff is pushed upon from you. What you see, what's strange, hey, there's this person that went to the synagogue today and saying some things that didn't seem right. Like that's what helps push these things along. We're all in this together, right? At the end of the day, you don't have to have a badge or a gun to make a change, right? I think we've learned that over the last couple of decades. It's tips, it's things that people recognize that help push these things down the road. So I'm confident that we're doing our best. Homeland Security people, emergency management people, law enforcement, fire, everyone's trying to do their best to stop this from happening. So, yes, sir.
I end up with about 3 comments.
Sure.
And then a question. The first comment is Southern Poverty Law Center has been following all of these groups forever. And I hope that all of you that are working within the state realize what an asset they are to identifying all those things. That's just an aside.
Mhm.
The other one is, I'm old enough to have lived through, put your head under the desk, build a bomb shelter from the 50s and the 60s that we did. And my guess is that nobody ever used them. And I feel the same way. I feel totally different than my wife does about having 3 days stuff stored away, because if you do, you've got to have stuff that's not going to deteriorate. You've got to have a way to open it, as you said. There's just a lot of considerations that most of us don't pay enough attention to. And then lastly, you know, these groups are working because they're sowing doubt. They do not even have to come into this church. When we did an assessment here and everything, we now lock doors, we close doors, we put in an awful lot of money to control access to the building. And I really think that the system is being abused by those terrorists to get us to do all sorts of strange things. And my question of you is, at what point do we quit doing that, or do we?
All right, so I'm gonna go back to your first comment. SPLC, big fan of theirs. I get a lot of research from there. There's a thing called the hate map, SPLC. If you hit the hate map, it'll tell you all the hate groups that are in America, and you'd be surprised like how many are in the state, right? So put that out there. So, you know, I would say that you always want to be prepared. Yes, you always have to be a step ahead. I think sometimes we get complacent, right? So we say, well, you know what? I've done all this and nothing's changed, so forget it, right? And that's where people that are trying to expose your weaknesses pop in, because they're like, oh, you're exhausted. Now I come in, right? So it's kind of like, you know, think about security guards. If I'm a security guard and I'm on my phone every day, I'm looking at say the Chiefs game, I'm watching Super Bowl, right? I'm watching the playoffs, and I'm a bad guy and I'm doing surveillance on you. I know that you're going to have your head to the phone. I know that, hey, you have gone to the bathroom and you go to the bathroom between 2 and 3. You also like take a smoke break and you walk away from your spot. That's the complacency. That's why we have to stay vigilant, because if we don't stay vigilant, people are going to expose us. So my comment to that is, you got to stay vigilant. We have to keep finding ways to stop these things from happening. So I like the question though. Yes.
November is coming, and I don't really look forward to it because it feels like whatever happens, it's going to be chaotic. And Biden could win huge, and we will still have what we've had, the denial, the accusations of stolen elections and all. What can you say to reassure us that we could get through this with less trauma?
Well, you know, we're all in this together, right? You know, regardless of your political thoughts, right? We're all Americans. We're all in this together, and yeah, there could be, right? There could be some violence that happens because of the election, and there's a lot of people out there making sure that they can be quelled. But I would say that just be aware, right? I don't want to sit here and tell you like everything's gonna be all right. I don't even know, right? But it goes back to what I said earlier about being vigilant, right? It's gonna be okay. We're gonna figure this out, but we have to be vigilant until we get to that sweet spot, right? So that comes back to, if you hear someone saying something that's a little off-putting, letting somebody know. Being aware of your surroundings, right? Because I've said this, I talk about this in class. I can have an ideology that is off-putting to you, okay? And there's 3 of us in the room, okay? 3 of us are talking, 2 people agree, 1 person does not. I go cause violence. When I cause violence and I shoot that gun, that bullet's not gonna say, hey, you know what? This guy agrees with you. So I'm just gonna, this isn't Looney Tunes. It's not gonna zip away, right? It's gonna hit everybody. So that's what I'm saying. If you are hearing things or people are saying things that are off-putting and doesn't make sense, and you may like, yeah, I kind of agree like on one thing, but the other thing is a little off base, let somebody know. Because again, when it comes down to that violence, you can lose someone you love because you didn't say something, right? So I would say be vigilant, be aware, and just, we're going to get through this. I promise you, we're going to get through this. But I can't tell you what next week brings. I can just tell you to make sure that you're aware of what's around you and you're protecting yourself. So.
What concerns me is that the United States Constitution is very clear that immigration is a federal issue controlled by the federal government. We've now got the state of Texas that is openly violating the law. And now we're having governors like ours sending troops, National Guard troops to Texas to support Texas in this, basically. If we see a civil war, it seems to me it's very likely it could occur. If enough National Guards are sent in a specific area and confront federal troops, where are we going to go from there?
So, I can't speak to the governor's motivations. I can't speak for the governor. Yeah, I know, but I can't speak for the governor and her choices or things that she decided to do. But I would say that yes, there are conflicts, right, because of what the United States Constitution says when it comes to protecting U.S. citizens and then the enforcement against U.S. citizens, right? It's a very tricky situation. And we had this, if you remember, from our last presidency. There was an issue in D.C. where the National Guard was called. It wasn't January 6th. Look it up. You'll find that out. But so, again, Texas is openly defying the law. We're hoping that somehow Texas and the U.S. government can kind of come to a conclusion. This can't continue on. I don't, again, foresee that Texas is going to secede from the union. A lot of this stuff is political, right? A lot of political shenanigans. Say that. Shenanigans, political shenanigans. You can use that. But overall, again, we go back to like the rule of law and what's possible. And, there's a lot of things that happen with funding and things of that nature. I'm sure that is happening behind the scenes. And this is what comes back to media, right? I said this earlier. All we hear about is the Concertina wire and Texas defying. We're not hearing what's really, there's other things that are happening that are behind closed doors. We're just assuming that, the governor is like, we're going to keep fighting. I'm sure he's got his thing, but there's more to it. So it's about research and hope. Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Certainly the greatest risk to all of us in terms of terrorism is due to the guns that are in circulation. And the way that there seems to be a lack of, not oversight, but for example, our state government now seems to think that guns are the answer to everything. So if the legislature won't accept pastors in every school, maybe armed pastors in every school would go over and fill a real need. But how do you deal with the illiteracy? There's a functional illiteracy in the state about weapons and guns and schools. How do you deal with that?
I can't speak to the states or different representatives' thoughts on these things. But as someone has yelled vote, right? So if you don't agree with their ideology, then there's ways to push them to do something different. When it comes to the rights of the Second Amendment is important as a country that we have Second Amendment rights. That's part of the Constitution. But when it comes down to how many weapons and things like that, we didn't think about that. It wasn't thought about when the Constitution was ratified. So there's a lot of things that need to be adjusted. But to answer your initial question, I don't know the motivations of most people. I really know what I'm doing half the time, right? So I can't speak for somebody else. But yes, ma'am.
Hi. Recently, I've seen a former FBI agent on a cable news show that I watch, and he speaks to how the laws are not good to fight against the domestic terrorism. The same laws that apply to international terrorism do not apply to the domestic. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so if you think about hate crimes legislation in general, right? Hate crimes legislation is very spotty when it comes to like what's considered a hate crime. So if I get into a fight at a bar, I guess a good example, and the person says something that's racially insensitive to me, depending on how that report is written, it might be like, well, he was just angry, right? So if you think about the enhanced terrorism and the Patriot Act, U.S. Patriot Act, it gives the government enhanced ways to investigate possible international terrorists. We don't have the same thing for domestic terrorists because it violates our Constitution, right? So this is the trick, right? Because the Constitution is what we look at, but so internationally we can do a lot more. And I know this is one of the things that needs to be addressed, is because what's good for the goose isn't good for the gander, right? But again, our Constitution is what we run our country on, so there has to be ways to look and investigate these acts that are causing terror to Americans. So he was right. Yeah, he's 100%. I see you, but I won't get you, I promise.
You talk about vigilance, and it seems to me that a part of vigilance also applies to keeping an eye out for the rules and the laws that govern our voting and our participation in society and in elections. So it seems to me like we need to be really vigilant and advocate for those laws, or to protect those laws, or against those proposals in our current legislature that are trying to weaken our voting rights, making it more difficult to vote. That we also need to look at issues like gender balance in boards and commissions, because if we can't all participate fairly and equally in society, then that sets up a two-tier structure. All the anti-LGBTQ bills that we're facing are all about creating differences and reinforcing second-class citizenship, banning our books, banning African American history, all of those things we need to pay attention to. That's all part of our vigilance. I'm just calling for everybody to advocate about all those things.
Well, I was going to say, the Voting Rights Act that was pushed, during the 60s, people marched. I mean, those voting rights acts have been chopped down to basically nothing. So to your point, yeah, there are things that are out there that you just got to continue to talk about, because if not, we are historically going backwards if we don't stop this flow right now. So, good point. Ma'am, I know you really wanted to ask questions.
I just have a quick question. Just one briefly. Should Texas secede from the Union, would I need a passport?
Well, this is. I'll end this way. Texas and California could actually, their GDP is the gross domestic product is like the top 10 or 15 in the world, right? So that's first and foremost. California and Texas have a lot of power in the United States. That being said, it would be hard if Texas seceded or California. Like, if we look at the map, for our country wouldn't be the United States anymore. It'd be actually little states. So you have to think about, how do you run those little states? The military, treaties, right? So there's a lot more to it than just I'm seceding and we're good. No, there's a lot more. Because think about Europe. Money, depending where you're at, the currency's different. The American dollar would no longer be sustainable because we're no longer the United States, right? So that's what I mean. There's a lot of things to think about when we talk about the seceding and this kind of this tension. So I know I'm past my time. I'll stick around if people have other questions or comments, but I appreciate your time today. It's a very sensitive subject, and I appreciate you guys coming in to listen, because we need more of this. Thank you.
I'm not putting my face in the phone for not a reason. So if you got our email this morning with the legislative update, there was a new bill that was introduced, passed out of subcommittee, passed out of committee this week, all of that this week. And it's under the subtitle of immigrant rights in the legislative update. House Study Bill 703, that will get renumbered because it's passed out of committee. I know that's a really confusing process, and why do things get renumbered and stuff. But currently it's House Study Bill 703. And I bring that up because of the conversation about Texas. In the committee, Representative Holt is super angry about immigration issues. Always is, always has been. But used language differently than I have ever heard him use. And it was essentially that Iowa needs to do its own thing and do what it needs to do to, quote, protect its people from people coming into our state. It was as close to insurrection language that I've ever heard at the State House. So I urge you to look at that bill, House Study Bill 703, and whatever it gets renumbered to. First of all, standing up for people who are coming to our state for innumerable reasons, but also that is not the direction that our state should be taking, and dehumanizing and demonizing people. And yes, there are issues with immigration in our country. We all know that. This is not the solution. And so he really kind of referenced the idea of Iowa going against the federal government. And it was alarming. So I just wanted you to know that piece of it because of the conversation about Texas. It's also Iowa. So it was a little bit different conversation than we normally have, but I hope that you learned something. I learned something every single time in Crossroads, but I'm really grateful to Dio and Dio's expertise. And so let's give them a round of applause. Next month, we're going to talk about banned books. So if you know the organization that was created just a year or two ago, Annie's Foundation, the founder of that, and her name escapes me at the moment, Sarah Hayden Paris, thank you, Parrish. And so she will be with us. Crossroads is always the third Friday of the month, always the same place, always the same time, and I hope you will join us. Please do register to do that, and I'll remind you about Monday, Lobby Day at the State House. Let us know if you plan to come, and then the fundraiser in the evening, 5:30 to 7:30. Would love to have you be there. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.